Each weapon in New World has its own set of unique strengths that kind of set it apart and make it strong. And knowing how and when to use and exploit these strengths is kind of how you find the most value in PvP using, whatever build you're using. When it comes to the rapier, there is a couple of different things that kind of make up the identity of the rapier and different aspects of it that make it good. And for the most part, a lot of the builds that you see in PvP that feature a rapier are only utilizing a really small sliver of what makes a rapier good, and that is the mobility of the weapon. And while that is definitely a perfectly fine way to use the weapon, I definitely feel that you are missing out and not really utilizing what makes the rapier a very, very strong weapon. Now, the reason why I haven't really, touched on this aspect of how the rapier is used in the past really at all is because, to be honest, I don't really care how other people use the weapon because it doesn't really affect how I like to use the weapon. But I do think that there is a lesson in there that we can kind of use to learn. And while mobility is definitely one of the things that makes the rapier a very strong weapon, how you use that mobility is where I think people are kind of missing on the mark a little bit. Each weapon in the game has an optimal range that it kind of likes to fight in. And it's deeper than just melee weapons like fighting in melee range and ranged weapons like fighting at distance. Each weapon, as I mentioned, has different attributes and things that set it apart. And when you actually kind of dig into it and break down each weapon, how you fight in each weapon's range and deal with the tools that they have is going to differ per weapon. So, for example, I'd argue that spear, great axe, and hammer all have pretty similar ranges that they like fighting in, but they all fight in said range very, very differently. Hammer is potentially one of the hardest single hit damage out of all those weapons if you can land a combo on somebody, but it is also one of the slowest weapons out of all those weapons. So you can give a little bit more leeway in fighting within hammer range. You can take advantage of things such as how slow its attacks are to get in multiple attacks while their abilities are winding up, and then still be able to dodge out of the way in time, versus something like spear, which is probably the fastest out of all three of those weapons. And when I say the fastest, I don't necessarily mean how fast the attacks are. I mean how fast the animations are. The animations for hammer are very, very slow, and things like sweep for spear are very, very fast. So when it comes to fighting in spear range, it becomes much, much different than hammer range, because if you're trying to play a game of reacting, you have much less time to react to spear, and that's going to kind of dictate how you fight them, because if you're just in their range waiting for an ability to come out, they can just poke you down. So that's kind of where I feel the rapier really shines, is being able to use its mobility to not just run away, but dictate the range in which you are fighting each opponent and how you're fighting each opponent in that range. And speaking of spear, we have a little 1v1 here in the background, and try to take note of the ranges that we're fighting in. I go for a parry on the higher likelihood of landing it on that fortify or the perforate there, and as soon as the threat of the sweep is there, we're immediately kind of outside of his range. And then once the threat of it is down, because we know we just dodged it, is when I kind of go back in for my rapier aggression. And the second that I feel that it's back up is when you see me kind of respace myself back out and go for the fire staff. And he goes in for the spear sweep again, and we are, again, like I said, out of range of that. So constantly staying out of the range of the threat of a spear. And conditioning him to that, the first time that I go for a parry in that entire little 1v1 there, it ends up being the time we kill, because he hasn't really seen us trying to go for a parry on his sweeps. So it's a combination of knowledge of weapons, the other weapons in the game, and knowing how and the ranges they want to fight in, and also conditioning your opponents and kind of getting in their head. It's a little mixture of both of those things. And then expanding that idea a little bit more to then when it comes to outnumbered fighting, that's then how you want to kind of take your fights, because in really any PvP game, that's generally how you get better. It's by knowing what each build or each other weapon in the game is going to want to do, how they're going to want to fight, because that's the only way that you'll be able to take advantage of and exploit things about your weapon. But we do have a couple of clips here. I haven't really done a commentary on the Fire Staff and Rapier build in a little bit, so I wanted to bring you guys something and take a little bit of a break from the Spear build that's going on. But we end up taking out a Spear and Great Axe player there pretty nicely, and we make our way up to the back point here. And repositioning is going to be the first thing that I want to do here, because we have a lot of range pressure in both mages and dex players. So we do a little bit of poking as we're kind of retreating there, and as soon as we kind of break line of sight, we just make our way around the corner here. And I know that this mage wants to be in my face using Flamethrower, but I can reliably get damage out faster than he can. And we stay super aggressive on him as he is jumping out of that entomb, because I know that that's pretty much his only defensive option, as he doesn't have Ice Shower. So stay super aggressive and pretty much run him out of stamina and able to run him down with the Rapier. And same thing with the second mages there. We land a huge Incinerate and immediately switch to the Rapier and get in a ton of damage before he can really even react to what we want to do. But when it comes to mages, it's actually pretty interesting. With Flamethrower becoming more popular, they may like to fight in melee or even a more of a distant range than a Flamethrower range. But that's something that you kind of have to realize in fights and adapt to accordingly. We make our way inside the point here, land another juicy Incinerate on one of those mages, and we are almost able to take him out there, but we are getting a couple more spawns in here, and we try to stay aggressive on that Flamethrower. Anytime that I'm not attacking him, you see I'm constantly on my feet and staying just outside of the range of that Flamethrower, so we're not just getting free ticks of damage. But as we get a lot more spawns in there, we kind of are forced to retreat. One of the mages jumps over the wall, and we land a fat fireball on him, and again, just switch to that Rapier and are able to finish him out. And same thing with the second mage there. He actually kind of chases us down without being full on health. But this is kind of the thing that makes outnumbered fighting hard as well. You have to kind of figure out which target is going to be the fastest and the smartest option to go for first. You see, while I'm trying to kind of stay outside of that Flamethrower range, everybody else is kind of able to just kind of pick us off and deal with us, and we do fall there. But it's things like that which you want to be thinking about, kind of be taking tabs of each target that's in the fight and how you want to deal with them. Now, when it comes to fighting ranged builds, just like with melee, it's a little bit deeper than just ranged builds wants to fight at range. You know, with Flamethrower becoming a lot more popular, both Fire Staff and Ice Gauntlet now have close range options for both of those builds. And that's kind of what we're seeing right now. A lot of mage builds are actually close range fighting mage builds. So, you know, taking that into account as well is going to kind of dictate how you want to fight the fight. But when it comes to bows and muskets, that's a little bit more straightforward. For the most part, they don't want to be close to you. They want to be far away, doing damage at range. And that is something that we're going to be actively trying to avoid the entire fight. So we have a bow rapier player here with a couple of other players shooting us in the back. But like I said, bows want to be at range. So the entire time this fight is going to be us closing the distance and pretty much not giving him any room to breathe. Anytime that we are not actively in melee range, we are on the fire staff, as you see here, just kind of chucking in heavy and light attacks. And the second that I see him stop for an ability, or give me really any opening to close the distance with the rapier, you see we jump in immediately, and he pretty much has no time to be able to put in damage to us. When we are close, we're poking him with that rapier and pretty much not allowing him to live unless he runs. And then even when he thinks he has time at range, he has a fireball flying at him, and it's going to be a matter of time. And as you see, he runs himself out of stamina there, and we are able to finish him off with the rapier as we're pretty much right on his tail, and we are left to a musket and another bow player. But being that the rapier, excuse me, is going to be the harder build to take on, I wanted to kind of get that out of the way. And then we're kind of left to these two other targets, one of them being Spear. Now, as we just kind of went over, Spear has a very distinct range that it likes to fight in. So we're pretty much not going to give her a chance to land that sweep. And you see we do a pretty good job of avoiding it. But this musket player doesn't really seem to have that much con or resilience on his gear. So he's going to be the target that I try to go for next. We use that roll to kind of space the Spear up, land a huge incinerate on top of the rune onto that musket player, and we switch to the Spear player, who also doesn't have that much con and resilience, and we take her out pretty quickly as well. But yeah, even with range builds, there's a kind of a nice little dance that you want to play when it comes to fighting them. I hope that does help a little bit, though. I also wanted to give you guys a little bit of an update and a little bit of gameplay with the Fire Staff and Rapier build, because I haven't really shown too much of it since the patches dropped, but it definitely is probably the most fun build that I've been playing out of all my builds right now. So once we are done with the Spear and Void Gauntlet build, we will definitely be seeing a lot more of this. But as always, thank you guys so much for watching, and have a great day.